I said, who is ready to get in the Word this morning? Well, I have a question for you. I'm getting some feedback here. Do you hear that? Has anyone ever been watching a TV show or maybe a sports show when all of a sudden the screen changes and a loud broadcaster comes on saying, "We interrupt your program to give you breaking news. Take it away, Jerry." Anybody ever experienced that? Yeah. You're watching something and then the big news comes, breaking news, dun dun dun, and it takes away. Well, that's an interruption. That's an interruption to us watching TV, to watching sports, to rewatching our favorite preacher on TV. It's an interruption, and no one likes interruptions. I know my father hates interruptions when he's watching the hockey game.
Amen.
So you know what I do? I purposely interrupt him while he's watching the hockey.
Good girl.
As the baby of the family, it is my job to cause interruptions in their life. But no one likes interruptions, especially when you're watching your favorite show or you're focused working on something, you're in the middle of a task, and someone comes, you know, man, when you're building something and your wife comes and you have the hammer and they say something and then boom, you hit your thumb with the hammer. Because it was an interruption and you lost your focus. No one likes interruptions. You know, Tuesdays here are the busiest day out of the week besides Sundays here at the church. And I know that when I'm here working in my office, I will get an interruption, one or two at least, every Tuesday. So I know that I do not plan to work on anything on Tuesday that requires a lot of focus. Because for me, I need to be focused. It takes a long time for my brain to focus because I'm like a bunny. I'm like here, there, and everywhere. So when I have an interruption, then I go from here, there, and there, and there, and there, where, all around the world. You know what I mean? So I purposely plan not to work on anything that requires a lot of focus on Tuesdays. And that's okay, because I welcome the interruptions. I know that it's important what they have to say, whether it's Rhea or Bonnie or my dad or someone or Pat coming to knock on my door. I welcome the interruptions. My father, not so much, because it's a frequent thing with him. But I guess he's just getting back at me. But I know that I have to work on this stuff in the later of the week, that I need a lot of focus and that I won't have so many interruptions. Because something I've learned as I've gotten older and I've experienced life is that interruption usually leads to disruption. Interruption usually leads to disruption. Either a disruption of focus, a disruption of life, a disruption of plans. Whatever it may be, interruption usually leads to disruption. And sometimes, more than sometimes, like all the time, God likes to interrupt and disrupt our lives. He does. He likes to interrupt our lives for His sake and our sake. And don't we all just love it when God comes and interrupts our life? You hear the sarcasm in my voice? You're living your life. You're doing the thing. You're doing your work. You're loving your wife. You're loving your husband. You're loving your kids. And then all of a sudden, God comes in and says, no, you're changing course. What? But God, I'm good at what I'm doing. No. You're changing the course. But God, I'm satisfied at where I'm at. I feel fulfilled. No, we're changing the course. But God, do I really have to? Yes. changing the course. God likes to interrupt our life. And in the next few weeks, we are going to be looking at the Christmas story and how it really was an interruption and a divine disruption of people's lives. It was an interruption to the lives of the people that were directly involved in that very first Christmas. And it was an interruption for the lives to come, because it affects us today. The first Christmas, the greatest interruption there ever was. The first Christmas, the greatest interruption there ever was. The first interruption in the Christmas story we'll be talking about today is found in Luke 2, starting in verse 8. Luke 2, verse 8. Luke 2, verse 8. And now there were in the same country shepherds living out in the fields, keeping watch over their flock by night. And behold, an angel of the Lord stood before them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were greatly afraid. Dude, I would have been petrified if I was a shepherd. I would have been shocked, scareless. If you're just there in the field, it's dark at night, being a shepherd, being a shepherd, you are limited with your interactions with people. You only interact with your select few of shepherd bros from the hood. I guess shepherd bros from the field would be more accurate. But you only interact with your select few. You know how it's going to go your night. As a shepherd, you're used to each other. You're used to your surroundings. You're used to your flock. You know that Sneezy over there is going to be sneezing all night, because who would become a shepherd when you are allergic to the animals? But he did. And you know that guy over there, he is going to fall asleep after counting all the sheep. And once he's done counting all the sheep and he falls asleep, you know that you're stuck doing all his work. You know your life. You know your night, how it's going to play out. You're prepared for your regular Monday and Tuesday night. You know all the highlights that's going to happen. You know that this is going to happen. It's dark. There's not really a lot going on. You know that it's not going to be very eventful. As a shepherd, your life, if you are looking for a thrilling career, do not be a shepherd. Because it's not. It was a dark night when all of a sudden you're in the middle of a field, there's no lights, and it's like a football stadium light comes on, and the glory of the Lord shines upon you, and an angel of all things appears. Terrifying. Because all at once, their regular Monday night, their schedule, their task at hand, they were interrupted. Their job was interrupted. And interruptions, they tend to make us terrified, just like the shepherds were that night. Like I said earlier, when God says we're changing course, all of a sudden we're terrified. Because we don't like change. We are creatures of habit. I'm a creature of habit. I like having my Timmies on my way to town, from Chelmsford to Woodstock. And when the line is big out the door, then I don't get my Timmies because I ain't patient enough to wait. We are creatures of habit, and we don't like changes to come our way, especially interruptions that we are not expecting or planning for. We like to stick to the plan and keep it in order. Interruptions, they tend to make us terrified, just like the shepherds were like that night. And let me just say, if you have to preface your conversation with this as the opening line, as we read in verse 10, you know you've just freaked someone out. Then the angel said to them, do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. Odds are that the angel knew and could see on the shepherd's face that they were terrified.
Yeah.
That their night, their regular mundane night, was interrupted. You know, just this past week, I had a terrifying experience here at the church. I was working in my office here on a Thursday, and normally I don't work here on Thursdays. I'm in Brantford at Elam Fellowship, but because it was foggy, I was here working, and I thought I was the only one in the building. Well, I thought wrong. I get up from my desk, and I'm at my door, and all of a sudden I see a face in my window. And it took me a minute to figure out that it was a person and that there was a face there. And all of a sudden, guys, I literally screamed. I went, ah! I screamed because I thought I was the only one. I was terrified. You know, because sometimes we have homeless people around the building. So I thought someone had gotten in. It took me a minute to realize that it was Barb. And so all I could picture, I screamed, I jumped, I did all these things, and I just thought, man, I probably look so ridiculous. But it scared me so bad, because when you're not expecting something, when you're used to your routine of being here alone and working here alone, and then someone comes and interrupts your regular day, man, that causes you to scream and jump a little. And I picture that is exactly how the shepherds reacted that night. The glory of the Lord shone, and an angel appeared, and they went, ah! Now, every time you hear this story, you're going to think of me screaming. But that's how I picture them, because I think that's how they reacted. They didn't act all cool and tough, like I'm a shepherd. No, I bet they screamed like a little girl that night. Because it's terrifying. It is terrifying when your life gets interrupted, especially in the way that their night got interrupted. When you're used to darkness, when you're used to loneliness, when you're used to being alone in the dark, and all of a sudden there is a light and someone appears, that is scary. That is terrifying. Interruptions are terrifying. But the thing we notice about when God interrupts your life, just like he interrupted the shepherds that night, is he always comforts your fears first. He always comforts your fears first. He always addresses your fears. Literally, the first thing out of the angel's mouth to the shepherds was what? Do?
Not be afraid.
Let's try that one more time. Do?
Not be afraid.
Do not be afraid. With interruption and disruption of our life comes fear. Has anybody been feared by something disrupting your life? Am I the only one here that has experienced that? You know, Al was telling me a story that happened last week. He was driving from band practice, and all of a sudden he hits black ice. And the car sways out of control, and then by God's miracle power, he was able to correct it, and they were safe. But that scared you, right, Al?
Yeah. Well, not at the time, but later.
But later. It was an after effect. It took you a minute to realize that there was a face right there, right? But anyways, It scares you when you're on the path of life and you hit black ice, not black lice, black ice. You hit black ice. I'm going to get tongue-tied today. You hit it, and all of a sudden, you're going in another direction. But that's kind of what God likes to do. But God always will comfort your fears. He doesn't interrupt your life without addressing your fears first. He doesn't disrupt your life without addressing your concerns first. He will always address your fears head on. See, God likes to address your fears head on because otherwise, that night when the shepherds experienced the angel of the Lord coming to them, if the angel did not say, "Do not be afraid," the shepherds, they would have heard nothing that the angel had to say. Because they would have been wrapped up in fear. They would have been concentrating on the fear that just took place. They would have been wrapped up in their feelings. And you won't be able to listen to the good news that God has for you if you are consumed by your fear. So that is why God always addresses your fears first. Verse 10, it says, "Then the angel said to them, 'Do not be afraid, for behold, I will bring you good tidings of great joy.'" First he scares them. Now he says, "But wait, I have good tidings of great joy, which will be to all people." You know, out of the Christmas story, I think the shepherds are the most relatable people in the story. Shepherds, at that time, they were really nobodies. They smelled. Some of you know what that's like. I'll just move on. Expecting a little bit more laughter there, but that's okay. They worked hard to provide for their families. Shepherds were hard workers. They had working hands, as my granny would say. They never got any recognition, though, shepherds. It was not a thankful career. They were socially isolated in their work. They only worked with their shepherd bros in their hood or in their field. They only interacted with people and sheep. Shepherd in biblical times were pretty much the blue-collar class of biblical times. Their life sometimes felt meaningless. And yet God thought that they were worthy enough to be one of the first to hear the good news of the birth of Jesus. When the world looked at them as meaningless and worthless, God saw them as worthy. He saw them as worthy enough to interrupt their night. And here we see a foreshadowing of Jesus' ministry, that he came for everyone. He came for the lowliest of people to the most prominent of society. Jesus came for everyone. And even the birth announcement of Jesus went from the lowliest to the most prominent people. His birth came as an interruption to disrupt the sin in our lives. And the good news is that when God comes to interrupt your life, he not only addresses your fears, but he doesn't just leave you hanging. When he interrupts your life, he always provides you a direction. So that night, the angel of the Lord scared the shepherds almost to death. And said, "Do not be afraid." But then what followed after? Directions. Here we have the shepherds having their normal, mundane night at work interrupted by an angel. And then the angel then goes on to say why he chose to scare them. Why he goes to say that he interrupted their night. We're off to a great start. Why he interrupted their flock tending. He brings clarity and direction to the interruption. God always brings clarity and direction to interruptions in our lives. Just like when you're watching TV and the breaking news comes on and it starts with a declaration headline saying breaking news. And then once it changes over to the news anchors, they go on to bring clarity and understanding of why your TV show just got interrupted. That is what the angel and that is what God does for us. He will never interrupt your life without direction. In verse 11, we see the directions the angel gives to the shepherds. Verse 11, it says, "For there born to you this day in the city of David a Savior." Where? The city of David. Who is Christ the Lord. This was the reason for the angel interrupting their night. To tell them that the Savior, who is Christ the Lord, was born in the city of David. Verse 12, "And this will be a sign to you. You will find a babe wrapped in swaddling cloths, lying in a manger." These are what the shepherds are to look for. To look for a babe wrapped in swaddling cloths and lying in a manger. In that day, there wasn't a lot of babies that were laying in a manger. So for them to say that was giving clear direction that this will be a sign unto you.
Amen.
And when God interrupts your life, He always provides direction. It is not God's will for your life for you to feel directionless. Hear me say that. It is not God's will for you to feel directionless. See, when we search for Jesus, we never get lost. When we search for Jesus, we will always find our way.
Yes.
The shepherds, they weren't given the exact address of where the baby Jesus was. They weren't given the exact coordinates on a map. But God will always point us in the right direction. And He will give us sign after sign that we are headed in the right direction. For when we seek after Jesus Christ, when we seek after His presence, just like those smelly shepherds did that night, we will see confirmation after confirmation. And there will be no doubt that He is the real deal. Because Matthew 7, verse 7 says, "When you seek, you will find it." Jeremiah 29, verse 13, it says, "When you seek me and find me, when you seek me with all your heart." There was no doubt that when the shepherds heard that Christ the Lord was born, they went seeking with their whole hearts. They didn't ponder. They didn't wonder if this was real or if this was just a dream from the Mexican food they had the night before. They knew that this was real. In verse 13 it says, "Suddenly there was with the angel a multitude of the heavenly hosts, praising God and saying, 'Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill toward men.'" So it was when the angels had gone away from them into heaven that the shepherds said to one another, "Let us wait. Let us leave in 2 weeks when we can find someone to look after our sheep." No. Let us really wait and see. Maybe tomorrow night we'll get another angel to visit us to confirm what we just saw.
Second opinion.
No. It says, "Let us now," say that with me, now go to Bethlehem. See, there was no hesitation with the shepherds, but us, on the other hand, when we get a call from God to change course, when we get an interruption from God saying, "God, you have to change your course in life," we say, "Okay, God, but if this is really you, give me another sign." "Okay, God, but are you sure you really want me at that position? You want me to do that? Like, can you just tell me, okay, I'll give it 2 weeks to think about, and let me wait till someone else confirms it to see if it really is you. We tend to get too consumed with the logistics of our life that we forget that Jesus is calling us now. He's calling you just as you are. Smelly shepherd and all. Come now with no hesitation and let go. And walk forward into the presence of the Lord. They said, let us now go to Bethlehem and see this thing that has come to pass, which the Lord has made known to us. They knew that it was the Lord that made it known to them. And they came with haste and found Mary and Joseph and the babe lying in a manger. And now when they had seen him, they made it widely known the sayings which was told to them concerning this child. And all those who heard it, they marveled at those things which were told to them by the shepherds. But Mary, I love Mary. Mary, she kept all these things and she pondered them in her heart. And then the shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for all the things that they had heard and seen as it was told to them. Talk about faith. Talk about faith. The shepherds were told one thing. Imagine what it was like seeing and finding the babe exactly as they were told. Imagine what it was like bearing witness to the baby Jesus who was just born, and you, a nobody, was invited to be there, to be present with baby Jesus Christ the Lord. They saw what they were told. We see that because God comforted the shepherds' fears, He provided them with direction. The shepherds then saw and bore witness that God's interruptions in our life always carries a greater purpose. God's interruptions in our life always carries a greater purpose. Interruptions always lead to disruption. But when God disrupts our life, it is always for a greater purpose. See, the interruption that night was necessary for the shepherds to go from tending to their flock to meeting the baby Jesus, who would become the greatest shepherd ever.
Amen.
He came to those who one day He would lead. He came to those who one day He would save. And today, maybe you are like those shepherds. Maybe you are in a dark place today. Maybe you feel socially distant from people. Maybe you feel like a nobody, like a shepherd. Maybe you feel like you'll never get any recognition for all that you do. And you feel like you are some shepherd out in a field that no one sees. Maybe you feel like you are stuck in an unending, mundane routine. Maybe you feel a little lost and alone in your field today. Well, today, Jesus wants to interrupt your life. Jesus wants to interrupt your life.
Amen.
He wants to bring comfort to your fears. He wants to knock out those fears that you have. He is saying today, do not be afraid. Do not be afraid of this interruption or this disruption in your life. For when I interrupt your life, I will never leave you more lost than you've already been. I will always provide direction. Isaiah 30 verse 21 says, whether you turn to the right or to the left, your ears will hear a voice behind you saying, this is the way. Walk in it. Walk in it. God will always provide direction, especially when his interruption carries a greater purpose for our lives. That night, the shepherd's night started in a field of sheep, and it finished in the presence of the Lamb. That night, the shepherd's night started in a field of sheep, but it ended in the presence of the Lamb. God's purpose for his interruption is always greater than we can ever imagine. So never underestimate the power of a God-ordained interruption in your life, because you never know where he may be taking you. You never know that where God is interrupting your life, because he holds a greater purpose for you.